Pagoo Chapter 5. A Ride and a Fall Far from Home. Pagoo was only a tiny mite there in the tide pool, but he was angry through the entire length of him. No matter how big those two hermit boxers were, they just couldn't go bashing his feelers and face with those heavy-shelled tails. He'd show them. Pagoo's bad leap from his sand pit barely rolled 6 grains of sand from his own tail. As a leap, it was a flop. This was not like the old days at the surface when a snap of his gleaming tail could spring him forward. Though still under water, he was a landlubber now, and his stubby tail had no more spring in it than a coil of mud. It was plain that where he wanted to go, he must walk. So he walked. Pagoo walked right over, grabbed one of those roughnecks by the wrinkled seat of his fighting trunks, and climbed the fat bulge of the shell clear to the top. He teetered on the edge of the opening and stared down. Far below him, the battler's helmeted head and shoulders leaned from the shell. It was too far away for a hit, yet Pagoo swung, a left with his small glove, a sweeping right, which almost upset him. His childish blows just could not connect. He was merely fanning the water. Then the big boys started their next round. The fight broke out again right under Pagoo, and the confusion blew his anger into the sea. But in his mind, if Pagoo had had a mind, were the shouts of old pal, "Hang on, boy, hang on!" Little Pagoo seemed to be the referee of this fight, this whirling merry-go-round. From his high perch on the shell, right on top of things, as you might say, he was in a perfect position to learn pointers on hermit boxing. However, Pagoo soon was much too busy to see a thing. What his mind he had went blank. The boxers beneath him took all over mountaintops of muscled shells, into clusters of barnacles, through jungles of sanded kelp. The fighters staggered right into the center of the sea anemone. Pagoo held on for his life, and that was hauled out before the anemone's tentacles clutched the 3 of them. Oh, Pagoo met that tide pool fore, aft, and amidships, but he was too fogged to notice details. Sometime on top, sometimes under, his rubbery rear couldn't take the scalloping. He was so tired he had to let go and slide off. Pagoo had dismounted in rugged country. He sprawled on his back in a canyon with cliffs and ridges of mussel shells on either side. A moment ago he had galloped over these very ridges. Now he couldn't know them. When you're down in the gullies, the world looks different from the beautiful way it looks when you're riding high. Pagoo rolled over himself, and his right claw jerked outward and clicked against a muscle. Getting to his feet, he whisked both feelers over the rounded surface of the shell. Shell. Old Inksink whispered, "Sure, son, you ought to know that stuff is a shell. And what you need right now is a shell to sit in. You're sort of naked back there. Nature has changed your shape to fit in a shell, so go find one." Yes, a shell was what Pagoo wanted now, more than anything else in the whole world of water. Pagoo needed a shell to sit in, like those fat, round trunks the 2 fighters wore, but not so large. Pagoo needed a small shell. This muscle thing in front of him was a whopper. And where was the way in? He reared back and swung both eye stalks up and up. Why, this was 2 shells clamped together. Pagoo did not know that the soft muscle animal inside was a mollusk, nor that its 2 shells made it a bivalve. And he didn't much care. The double-shelled mussel towered up from the canyons, many times taller than little Pagoo was long. The mussel hugged its doors so tightly together, Pagoo just couldn't get in. He skidded up the lumpy valley, both eyes wagging, his feelers tapping and poking around corners. He found no hole that would not stay open. Some mollusks spread their shell doors slightly, like a book opens only a little to feed on sea soup. But Pagoo's softest feelers snapped those back doors shut. Pagoo had almost lost his feeler. Here's the mollusk forest he was kind of in. Pagoo was lucky to be a crustacean. If he had lost a feeler, a leg, or even a claw, he would not have been disabled forever. A new one would grow, bulging under his crust, and when he molted again, it would unfold ready for use. Since Pagoo could not climb into a mussel, he decided to hide between two of them, but there wasn't much chance. These mountain peaks were too close together. Well, then he'd tunnel under somewhere, but he couldn't even get started. He was stopped by nets of cord like jungle roots, horny things thick as silk thread. All these biases threads fastened each mussel to the rock base, roped mussel to mussel, sewed up the spaces between. Each mussel had spun his own cables to moor it fast against violent waves and tide. Pagoo saw one mussel laying a new bison moor line. The mussel's back door spread wide enough for a slender foot to spread out. More like a finger than a foot. It reached until it pressed on the rock several inches away. A sticky fluid from the gland inside the mussel's body ran down a groove in the foot like soft taffy sliding through a trough. In a couple of minutes, the taffy had hardened in the water to become a plastic bison thread tightly strung. Pagoo moved a feeler ever so little, yet the startled mollusk hauled up its foot and snapped its back door shut. Well, no matter. Pagoo didn't want a two-shell bivalve home. He seemed to want a one-shell, univalve home. Yes, and it should be small, his size, and empty, of course. He would search and find the right one. He promptly stepped on his gloves, tripped over the new cable, and went sprawling. Once more, a tired little Pagoo lay on his back in the canyon, staring up at the mussel peaks. They towered above him, ridge after ridge, growing pale in the watery distance beyond the tide pool towards the open sea. Pagoo, Chapter 5.